The Mercedes A-Class has recently had a facelift. What's new about it, and how does it compare with its arch-rival, the Audi A3? I'm AJ, and up front with the new A-Class, I really like the new power bulges on the bonnet. This is also a new redesigned radiator grille with a star pattern. This being the AMG-Line, we also get a much more athletic-looking lower part of the bumper. The A3 on the other side, well, this is the S-Line, so it also has a very athletic bumper, and I do like these blacked-out logo design. To me, the A3 is a lot more angular, and the A-Class is a lot more curved. Which one is your preference? What about this cool shooting location, right? But I swear to God, I did not do this. Both of these cars come with optional matrix LED lights. This is how it looks here on the Audi and similarly here on the Mercedes. Now, they're both very closely matched in terms of dimensions. They're both about 4.4 meters long. The Mercedes is just a little bit longer than the Audi. They both, in this case, have 18-inch wheels, but they both can have smaller or larger wheels as well. Being the AMG line, you get this AMG wheel. Looks really nice, a little bit more aerodynamic. And on the side profile, as you can see, again, very smooth and rounded shapes, very subtle lines, and a very subtle play on light and shadow here in the Mercedes. And I think one of the main differences is here in the C-pillar. This is a much more traditional hatchback-looking design, whereas if we make our way over to the Audi, well, already it has, again, a much more sharper design language with these sharper creases here on the lower part of the doors and that nice black skirt. And of course, at the end, they call it a sportback for a reason, I suppose, because this definitely has a very sportback-like straight design. So, between the two, I think I like the design of the Audi a little bit more. This is how the turning indicators look at the front of the Audi, and here's how it looks at the rear of the Audi, and here's how it looks at the front of the Mercedes, and here's how it looks at the rear of the Mercedes. Speaking of which, as you can clearly see, these are both the hatchback versions of these cars. They both also come in sedan versions. One of the new facelift redesigns is the new diffuser, but unfortunately they've retained these cosmetic fake exhaust tips. The Audi is still on the same boat because they also have fake exhaust tips. And this S-Line does have, again, some embellishments to make it look more attractive and aggressive and athletic in the lower part of the bumper. But overall, I still wish they had real exhaust tips. Here we have the key fob. Of course, you get keyless entry, so put it away in your pocket. The door opens nice and wide. Nice heavy heft to the door. Let's take a quick look at the door shutting sound. Yeah, really solid. No shimmies or shakes in any of the joints or the hinge on the rear door as well. The door itself has pretty decent materials up here on the top. Soft touch. This is also nice and padded. And you get a nice door bin as well. Taking a look inside, I do like this interior. I like these seats. You have that nice yellow piping and cross stitching, similar to the color on the outside. There are different options, including completely animal-free interiors, or at least the animal-free seats, which I always prefer. Getting inside, you've got to stoop down a little bit ever so slightly because, again, it's a hatchback. But once you're inside, you have nice adjustability for the seat and the steering column, so you can get a very nice, comfortable seating position. The cockpit in general is really geared towards the driver with these really cool jet fighter style air conditioning vents. They look like thrusters from a super jet. And then the touchscreen is also angled towards you. But hop in and let's take a closer look. The interior quality of the A3 is a bit hit and miss. Like, I like the soft squidgy material up here, but listen to this. That doesn't sound so solid to me. This does have ambient lighting. There's an LED strip right here, for example. It's not that bright though. But what I like here is, for example, you have a much more easy to use and a dedicated climate control system with its own little screen. I can change the temperature with these nice clicking toggle switches. Switches. And more buttons down here. Hooray. Inductive charging, a couple USB-C ports. And down here we have very minimalistic center console, start-stop button, and this is basically your gear selector. So shift by wire, press the P to park, and this is a nice little touchpad controller for example, the volume. So you can just swivel like this to turn the volume down or up, and to use the different track functions. Nice large steering wheel with individual buttons and rollers for the controls on the audio system. Paddle shifters on the rear, although they're just black plastic, not like a nice heavy metallic feel. And what I'm not the biggest fan of is the stock for the adaptive cruise control and limiter, and then a separate button up here with the lights for the lane keeping assist. We'll see how that feels when we're driving. But what I do like is the Audi virtual cockpit. So I can have, for example, different views. I can even put a map on this whole screen. So very useful to have, and in general, a very nice system. The Audi A3 also gets an optional head-up display, which conveys useful information like navigation, speed limit, and the assistance systems. This touchscreen system is something that we're quite familiar with. It's not the best, but it's certainly not the worst either. The navigation is fairly slick. It's basically running a Google navigation, so I think that's a great way to achieve this. The Apple CarPlay in the Audi A3 is actually really well executed. It's really slick in this case. It takes up most of the screen. Of course, you have the top and the left, which is not used, but overall, very easy to view. All right, let's take a look at the back seat of the A3. Door opens reasonably wide, and it's very easy to identify the ISOFIX points. So it's easy to put your child seats in, considering that this is a compact hatchback. So, I'm 5'8", about 1.73 meters, and this seat is set to my driving position, a little bit higher seating position today, and therefore, wow, actually not bad at all. Plenty of knee room. I can slide my feet under the front seat as well. Nice magazine mesh to, well, I don't have any magazines, but if you do, you could put them here. The middle seat is actually not as bad as I was expecting it to be. The bench is, of course, a little bit more raised, and the backrest is a little bit stiffer. And I am missing the panoramic roof, so there is an optional sunroof that you can get for the A3. But good news is, at least I have air conditioning vents. I can bring down the center as an armrest, and I have cup holders in this. So, yeah, not too bad, actually. I can very comfortably sit here with another co-passenger. 3 people might be a bit tight for long distances, though. All right, let's shift our focus to the A-Class now. That's the key fob. The door opens really nice and wide, even wider than the Audi, I would say. But the door shut sound is just as solid and resounding. Materials on the top are soft and plush, down here as well. Here it's a bit harder, but not terrible. Nice storage. But when we look inside, wow, very different than the Audi. As expected, Mercedes interior design is totally unique. With those circular air vents, the long rectangular information system for the entertainment and the cockpit, and of course the seats now, in this case we have animal leather, but you do get the Artico artificial leather seats as well. The A-Class feels a little bit different to sit inside than the Audi because, first of all, the windshield seems like it's further in front of me and I'm sitting further inside, deeper in the car. So different seating position, but of course you have plenty of adjustment for the seat itself as well as the steering column to find a very comfortable seating position for yourself. The materials on the inside of the Mercedes are actually much better. So the top is also very soft. Even this whole area is also very plush. The ambient lighting is a lot more brighter and a lot more vivid, and you have different kind of animations and multicolor options as compared to the Audi. So I think one of the main distinguishing factors between these two cars is the interior ambience. Of course, these circular air vents with additional lighting inside definitely helps towards that. However, what I'm not so happy with is this climate control module. I'm glad that it at least exists, unlike in the C-Class now, which is all part of the touchscreen, but there's no screen associated with these functions. So if I'm clicking the temperature to go down or up, well, I have to look at this screen to see what that temperature is. And if I have, for example, the reversing camera, I can't see the temperature anymore. So it's a little bit hit and miss. I'm glad that there are buttons, but I wish there was also a screen to display the numbers. But down here, you have an inductive phone charger, you have a couple USB ports, and beverage holders, and a very simplified center console because, of course, being a Mercedes, you don't have your gear selector here. You have a small roller for the volume control, to jump directly to the different driving modes here. The display itself is not the largest. It looks like it's a great large display, but the bezels are quite large in this case. But again, much better 360-degree view. In fact, our Audi doesn't have that option selected. This does, but this is definitely much better. The infotainment system in general is a bit hit and miss as well, because in the main menu, there's so much empty space that's being wasted. In the navigation, it gets better because you get a little bit of information about the music that you're listening to and your phone, but I think there should have been a bigger screen with more information. Here we can see the Apple CarPlay projection. Ooh, Michelle, should I read your messages? No, we're not going to do that. But overall, there is some room for improvement because, for example, this space right here is not being utilized, but definitely not the worst. I like this steering wheel more than the Audi. There, I said it. Because the paddle shifters are nice and big. They also have the silver color. It feels a little bit more eventful to use them. And I know that people don't generally like the haptic buttons, but what Mercedes has done is provide these indentations and these ridges, and because you have 4 separate sections on these 2 spokes on either side, it's easy to identify, and again with muscular memory, which spoke does what kinds of functions. Virtual cockpit, however, I think objectively is more or less the same in terms of the functionality and the information that it provides. Also, lots of different customization possibilities, like having this navigation view. You can also put a more sporty view like this, which I don't personally prefer. You can optionally get a head-up display, but this particular press card doesn't have it equipped. All right, now the back of the A-Class. The door opens pretty wide, but the opening itself is, I would say, not as large. But the ISOFIX points are actually not at all covered. The Audi had a little flap, whereas here there's no flap whatsoever. So a couple extra points for the A-Class. Getting inside, as expected, not too bad. I feel like I'm sitting a little bit lower here than I was in the A-Class, in the A3. So I don't have that much under thigh support. And the bench is also a little bit narrow. It doesn't extend that far out. That being said, for my 5'8", this seat is set to my driving position, and I have just about the same amount of knee room. I would say maybe a little bit less. Feet also plenty of space to slide down under the front seat. However, this little mesh here for the seat back pocket is a lot lower, so I don't know if I can really fit much comfortably or stable in the back. The center bench, the center seat is actually just as comfortable. Air conditioning vents, so at least that's nice. And I do have a center armrest, which is also comfortable. Plus points for the A-Class because the beverage holders are not built into this. So this is a nice, soft, comfortable place for me to keep my elbow. And the beverage holders are actually over here, and I can close them away. So a little bit more comfortable for the side passengers. But in general, I also wish that this had the panoramic roof. This is also an option for the A-Class, and then it will make the interior feel a little bit bigger and brighter. And the windows are not the largest, so you definitely need that to feel a little bit more spacious here in the A-Class. Let's take a look in the trunk of the A3. Very rectangular loading area. Depending on the engine, of course, then the drivetrain. So if you have the hybrid, for example, you can say goodbye to some of the trunk volume. But as this 40 TFSI version stands, this is 325 liters of boot space. Not terrible. I would say very usable. And as you can see, they do fold completely flat. And here in the A-Class, you get a little bit more trunk volume. This is 350 liters. And again, because this is a little bit longer in body, this is definitely the more practical of the two trunks. And same, you also get a very flat loading area here. Both these cars come with petrol, diesel, and plug-in hybrid options. Here today we have the 250 4MATIC and the 40 TFSI. To be honest, the 220 would have been the closer match, but Mercedes didn't have a press car for us to use. Nevertheless, this is a 2-liter Turbo 4 petrol engine, which makes 224 horsepower, made it to a 8-speed dual-clutch transmission, and a on-demand part-time all-wheel drive system. The 40 TFSI is also a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol engine. In this case, makes 190 horsepower and is mated to a 7-speed dual-clutch transmission, but also has the Quattro on-demand coupling-based system-controlled all-wheel drive system. All right, let's start with the Audi A3. So I'm just pulling up onto the Autobahn, so let's turn on the cruise control. There's a stalk here just below the left side of the steering wheel, which I can just use to initiate this. Now this this driver assistance system control is a little bit strange. To me, it's a bit hit and miss. For example, the speed limiter function, you have to press a tiny little button on the top of the stalk. It's not so easy to access. And then it doesn't have some of the advanced recognition. For example, if the speed limit changes, while the car detects the change in the speed limit, it doesn't apply that to the speed limiter. So it works well for the cruise control, where it will kind of even slow you down when you're coming towards an exit, or if you're coming up towards a roundabout or things like that. The distance monitoring and the radar control works really well. But the limiter, I think they just kind of missed out on that feature. The lane keeping assist also is activated on a different stalk, so it's easy to access, and once you get the hang of it, it's not a big deal, but it seems like a little bit of an afterthought. But on the whole, this system is very advanced. It's, again, the current gen, since this is a pretty new model, so around 2020 when this model generation was released. So with that, it's got the latest tech, so if I kind of swerve out of the lane, it brings me back and centers me in a very confident manner. And overall, a great security net to have, and I always recommend getting these ADAS systems. Apart from that, let's talk a little bit about the refinement. Definitely, the road noise and the wind noise is well contained. It's not completely isolated, so you do hear a little bit of it, but it's not actually that bad. For this segment, in this current generation of cars, I would say it's definitely one of the more quieter cars out there. Furthermore, the suspension, because of the Drive Select, which I would also again recommend that you get, also makes the ride very supple and planted. So you have that kind of frequency dependent damping, in the sense that it will iron out quick bumps and undulations, but as you start steering around corners, it will help position the car in a very flat manner. The steering also gets significantly heavier and therefore gives you more confidence. So, long drives on the Autobahn here, very comfortable. The seats are very supportive. You have enough space around you. You don't feel congested. The center console is also narrow and not necessarily impeding into your knee room, so definitely very comfortable for long drives. Around the city, the A3 is also really at home because of its compact dimensions. It's really easy to place the car in these narrow streets. And then the steering is really light, and again, that agile, connected feeling that it provides you really aids in maneuvering in these city conditions. The suspension here as well, on broken, rough surfaces, isn't jarring, and it's supple enough that it doesn't translate into vibrations onto your spine. Rear view mirror with that large windshield in the back, because of this hatchback design, also means you have really good view out back. This also has nice cameras. This current version only has a rear camera. It's pretty good, but the parking assist doesn't work that well. I tend to park my car by myself, so for me it's not a big issue, but if you really do use that parking feature, I would say test it out a couple times so you feel how it works and see if you're confident with that. But now we're on some nice little country roads, so let's go into the dynamic mode, put our foot down. Acceleration is decent, doesn't really throw you in the back of the seat kind of acceleration. Yeah, not so much. The engine sound is also pretty muted. It's not necessarily too sporty. Now this is not the S3 or the RS3. Oh boy, those cars are crazy. But this being the S-Line, I was maybe hoping for a little bit more punch. And this is the top 40 TFSI, right? So this should be a little bit more punchy. It's not terrible. It will definitely get the job done. But again, I think the main highlight in terms of being dynamic or in terms of being sporty comes again from the fact that the steering and the chassis are really, really well sorted out. So overall, I'm getting about 6.2, 6.3 liters for 100 kilometers, driving on the highway and driving on these country roads, which I think is a very respectable number. You also can put the car in the efficiency driving mode, and it can even improve further. But overall, the A3 is a very confident car, no real surprises, but in a good way. It's consistent. Now, how does the A-Class compare to the Audi? We're out on the highway once again, and already I can tell you the speed limiter, which I was saying I really like to use in the city, works a lot better in the A-Class. You know, it recognizes the speed limit, and then I can press one button to set the speed limiter to that speed limit without having to, go tick, 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 or up, down for the speed selection. Similarly, it notices that there's a car in front, so with the speed limiter on, if I remove my foot from the accelerator pedal, it already slows me down. If I change the speed limit setting down or up, it also will brake if I set it to a lower number, for example. So definitely these small little details really adds to that feeling of, oh, this car is smart. I have the cruise control on now. It just realized that the speed limit has changed to 100. Now it's going to accelerate itself, which, let's be fair, the Audi does as well. But this definitely feels a little bit more modern than the tech that's there on the Audi. But what I must say is the noise insulation is a little bit hit and miss. In general, it's really good, and Mercedes, I would say, they try to be quieter than the competition on the interior. And in general, the wind noise is really well contained. But on some rougher surfaces, the tire noise is a little bit more audible than the A3 here in the A-Class. Additionally, while you have different seat options, this particular seat option is a little bit firm for my taste. And I would recommend that if you have the ability to test drive different cars with different seat options, to do so you can feel which ones seem more suitable to your personal taste. The visibility is also a little bit lower in the A-Class than in the A3. It's also this more sloping A-pillar, which kind of makes it a little bit more hemmed in. I feel like I'm sitting further inside the cabin, a little bit deeper in, and surrounded by this all black interior. It makes it feel a little bit dark and a little bit more congested. That can be quickly rectified with a lighter colored roof liner, or better yet, the optional panoramic roof. But with the assistance systems, I feel really comfortable. It's a really calm and soothing experience. I can do a lot of miles, long distance driving in this car, no problem at all. Of course, the mileage really depends on how you drive. You can go into a eco driving mode, and then it tries to, even with the air conditioning, for example, tries to save as much energy as possible. And you can expect numbers around 6.5 to 7 on a reasonably combined use cycle. But this, being the 250 4MATIC, is a little bit more thirsty than the 4D TFSI. But ooh, look at these ambient lighting. I mean, this is what I was talking about. To me and my girlfriend, we like the Mercedes interior because, sure, it might seem a bit too much at times, but you can turn it off. You can change it to a very subtle color, or you can have it, with the full disco effect on the interior, if you so wish. So that versatility just makes the car feel a bit more special. And if you're spending 60,000 euros, it's gotta make you feel special to throw that kind of money down. Off the highway now and onto some country roads. How does it compare? To be honest, the Audi was a little bit more dialed in terms of the steering feel. Here at dead center, there's quite a bit of slack. It's not very direct. It's not really connecting you. And that's not really a surprise, considering that between BMW, Audi, and Mercedes is on the end of the spectrum where it's trying to isolate you from the road and cocoon you in luxury more than, well, BMW's on the other spectrum, but Audi is still in the middle, and I think in that way, I would have preferred a little bit more engagement. Things change a little bit, thankfully, when I go into the sport mode, but if I put my foot down, you see, I can almost count to 4 before the double clutch transmission, which I was expecting it to be faster, right? It's a double clutch, but it takes time to shift down. See, I'm here on this little road. I'm slowing down. There's nobody around. Put my foot down. Okay, I'm going to snap my fingers. Let's count how long it takes. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. Almost 4 Mississippis until I really felt that punch in sport mode. This is, being the 250, a little bit faster than the 4D TFSI. The 220 would be more in range with that power output. But 224 horsepower It's good. It's a good amount, but it's definitely not as thrilling. And it goes to show that even with the 40 TFSI, just because the steering was a little bit more dialed in, it was more fun to drive than here, even with the 250 4MATIC. You know, the steering is just, it's quite numb in that sense. But that's, again, more of a personal preference. Objectively, yes, it's not as engaging, but subjectively, it's doing the job well. It's, you know, a great steering system. There's no slack. It's just that there's a little bit of slack in the gearbox, and it's not that engaging. The color on the Audi A3 is called the metallic Python yellow. The color on the Mercedes A-Class is called the metallic Patagonia red. Last night I was messing on both of the configurators for these cars, and a similar spec always came to about 60,000 euros. Ouch, that's a lot of money for a compact, well, luxurious hatchback or sedan. So which one is my favorite? Well, I think the Audi definitely is the better car to drive. The steering is a lot more communicative, but the technology is a little bit still outdated and just cannot match the technology that you get on the Mercedes. Even though the Mercedes drives a little bit softer, has a little bit more slack in it, I think I'll stay happier for longer with this tech, and therefore this is my pick. But what about you guys? What do you think? Put your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, check out some of these other videos down here if you liked our show.